we've been looking at the world made ready. We've seen how God engineered things to get the world ready socially, politically, economically, and religiously. And that's where we were last time. We were looking at how the world was made ready religiously. We're looking specifically at the Jewish religion.
I grabbed the wrong one.
And the last people we were talking about were the Essenes. And I'm not sure if you got all this because we kind of ran out of time at the very end. The Essenes were a break-off group of the Pharisees. They were super Pharisees, if you will. They believed in separating themselves entirely from the rest of the people because of their impurity, and they would separate themselves from the temple because of the impurity of the Sadducees who were running the temple. And so they went off and lived alone in the wilderness areas. They numbered about 4,000 at the time of Christ. They would be considered escapists. So I gave you a key word for each of the groups, each of the religious parties at the time of Jesus. They are the escapists. Escape from the world, go live off in a commune. All of them were destroyed in 70 A.D. The Romans, not distinguishing between what groups of Jewish people they found in different places, they just killed all of those groups with whom they came in contact. Okay, something happened. Okay, so we have all of that. Here's a picture of the area of Qumran, which was one Essene community, and a little bit of information about them. They're primarily male. Some were celibate. They lived communally, and it appears that most of them considered marriage to be something that they would not be engaged in as they lived in these communities. Sometimes it would take 3 years for them to be initiated into the group, so they want to make sure that you were serious about what you were doing before they would allow you full membership. And they lived a life of moderation, or what we call asceticism. That is, doing without the luxuries of life, just surviving on the bare necessities. As I said, they didn't really care about the Jerusalem temple because it was under the control of the Sadducees. They observed the law even more than the Pharisees. Emphasis on purity, which included multiple times a day going through the water and bathing. They were fatalistic in their outlook. Let's see. Here's what Josephus says about them. All things are best ascribed to God. They teach immortality of souls. In other words, there's life after death. They say the rewards of righteousness are to be earnestly striven for. When they send what they have dedicated to God into the temple, they do not offer sacrifices. They have more pure lustrations of their own. In other words, their way of doing things was more pure than sending a sacrifice to the temple to be offered by these priests that were not pure. They addicted themselves of virtue. Let's see. They had all things in common. In other words, no one owned anything. It was all held together. Whatever food was there for everyone. A rich man enjoys no more of his own wealth than he has nothing at all. There are about 4,000 men that live in this way. Josephus says they don't marry, nor do they have servants. And let's just drop to this. The sect of the Essenes declares that fate is mistress of all things, and nothing befalls men unless it be in accordance with her decree. So in other words, and I'm not sure that they would have used the word fate. I think they would have said God. God is in control of everything. Nothing happens without his control. And this talks about the immortality of the person. They talk about evil souls are being taken to the dark pit. So there's a punishment for those that are evil after death. Talks about the doctrine of the resurrection. And the soul separated, it's born into one place, well ventilated, full of light. There it rests until judgment. And this is what the Greeks called the Isles of the Blessed. This comes from Hippolytus of Rome a little bit later. And we would call that, in the New Testament, it calls it Hades. Old Testament called it Sheol, the place of the dead. They despise riches. You can glance down through this and see what supports what we've already said. They don't buy or sell anything among themselves. They give to whoever needs it, and so on. This comes from Josephus. This is saying on the west side of the Dead Sea that there were Essenes living there. This is from Pliny the Elder. So a number of different people wrote about the Essenes. The practice, if you want to enter it, you don't get it there immediately. You wait outside for 1 year, and it tells you you're given a hatchet, a loincloth, and a white garment. And then you go through this progressive dedication. You're tested for 2 years, and so on. So it was not something. Hey, I think I'll go join the Essenes. Now you have to put in some time first to show your dedication. All right, here's a chart showing the different parties, the origins of them: the Pharisees, Sadducees, Essenes, and the Zealots. We talked about that. The leadership: the Pharisees, middle-class merchants. The Sadducees were priests primarily, often Hellenistic. The Essenes were dissident Sadducees or Pharisees who preferred isolation to participation in the temple services led by corrupt priests. The Zealots, extreme Pharisees, living primarily in Galilee. And we know that they attacked Romans whenever they could, and they would be the ones that would bring about the final revolt in the 60s. Here are the beliefs of the Pharisees. Glance down through there. Glance through the beliefs of each of these. And then the practices as well. Pharisees used the synagogue to promote their ideas. The Sadducees were in charge of the temple. The Essenes worked at copying and studying Torah. So when we found the Dead Sea Scrolls, it was the result of the Essenes being great copiers. They copied the Old Testament, they also copied other works. So we not only have the Old Testament from the Dead Sea Scrolls, but other things that they read and copied as well. They reject Hellenism, of course, practice ritual cleansing. The Zealots refuse to pay taxes. And were against the hated Romans. Okay, so there's some of each of those parties. All right, Jay, are you able to start keeping them straight between the different groups? Do you feel like you got a handle on that? Any questions? Anything you're not sure about here? All right, which one of these groups does not appear in the New Testament? Of these four. I mentioned to you, but maybe you don't remember. Or maybe you have read the Gospels enough that you know which one does not appear. Are the Pharisees mentioned in the Gospels? Sadducees? Essenes? No. Yeah, some of you are saying no. And the Zealots? Yeah. One of Jesus' disciples was a zealot. Remember that? Simon the Zealot, he's called. All right, so the Essenes do not appear in the New Testament, but they had an effect on the people at the time, so that's why we look at them. Okay, there's another group that is has influence at the time of Jesus. We find them in the Gospels, but they're not really religious groups per se. So we treat them a little bit separately. That's called the Herodians. The Herodians. Now, the Herodians were Hellenistic, so they embraced the Greek world, the Greco-Roman world, probably should say. They were secularists, if you want to use that word. They were not very religious. They were, in fact, political opportunists. Do you understand that word? Does that make sense to you? You look for opportunities to gain power, and however you can do that politically. And of course, it's named after whom? The group, it gets its name from whom? Herod the Great. And he and his father were great opportunists. And we'll talk about them in a little bit. And so they cooperated gladly with Rome. They embraced Rome. They thought Rome was great because it provided an opportunity for them to gain power, to gain authority in connection with the Roman government. All right, and that's pretty much all I have to say about the Herodians. They appear a couple times in the Gospels. In fact, in our Bible class, remember when the Pharisees and the Herodians were sent to Jesus by the Sadducees to trick him? Remember that? Well, what did they ask Jesus? The Pharisees and the Herodians, enemies, but they had something in common. They're trying to trick Jesus. Do you remember what they asked Jesus? Should we pay taxes to Caesar? And what was Jesus' answer? Well, actually, he didn't give an answer first. What did he do? He asked a question. And what was the question? Do you have a coin? And so they produced a coin, and what did he say? Looked at the coin. Whose image is on it? And so then what did he advise them? What was his answer to their question? Pay taxes to Caesar. Give what is Caesar's to Caesar, and to God what is God's. Yeah. All right. So that's one place where the Herodians come in. All right. Just to summarize what is true of these religious parties that were in part of Judaism, were in Israel, that there were low morals as well. It's not just among the Gentiles, but among the Jews. Moral standards proved inadequate. So the Jewish people had moral standards. They had the law, but you can see that some of the groups didn't keep it at all, and the Pharisees were so strict about it that they made it just a ritual. There was no personal relationship with God. And so morality was inadequate to supply man's needs. All right. Any questions about the Herodians or the Essenes we covered today, or even back the other groups, Pharisees, Sadducees, and Zealots? All right, on Monday, we're going to have a quiz over what we have covered so far in this section, A World Made Ready. And that includes the first three areas under that. It doesn't include political, which we're going to do next, but the political area is such a big one, I thought it would be good to have a quiz over the first three. And so we're looking at the first three areas of A World Made Ready, which would be social, economic, and religious. And that will be enough material for you to remember for a quiz. Everybody see where you are in the notes? A World Made Ready, starting with the social, and then economic, and then the religious. So you've got the religious world of the Romans, including the pagan religions and philosophy, and then you've got the religious world of the Jewish people, which includes all these parties. So there's a lot of information there. I'm going to give you the rest of the time today to look over that information, to study it on your own. If you would like to quiz one another, you may do that. But the rest of the period may be given over to preparing for the quiz on Monday. Are there any questions?